I decided to try some writing prompts last year, and I found it to be a fun challenge. It also helped me empty my head of a lot of story ideas that I couldn't stretch into standalone stories themselves. Many of these are experimental and are not written as well as they could be, but that is the purpose of these prompts for me, to throw ideas out. Not all are going to be as good as others, but I hope you enjoy them nonetheless. There was too much panic and confusion at the time to document things, but I figure now is the time, since we only have a few hours left. You probably know how all this came about, but I want you to know what happened to the last standing human base. We were evacuated to a military base in Arizona. They told us we were safe. The invaders couldn't get in. And for some time, they were right. As the sun fell, their anti-air guns fired late into the night. You could see the glow of the barrels from the civilian barracks. At first, we'd hear the soldiers loudly talking about how many fighters they shot down. But after around 3 weeks, their boastful voices got quieter. Last night, we found out why. The last anti-air battery ran out of ammo. No more on the base. Can't get new shipments in. Suppliers are too far away to make it back before night. A group of soldiers and civilians have left the base, planning to find another settlement to take refuge in. I doubt they'll make it. They've probably been tracked the whole way. I wrote this down so that whoever may find this, if there are survivors, I was here when they came. I was here when we fought back. I was here when we died. After computer technology was created, it became the fastest developing technology humanity ever made. As the decades went on and it became more sophisticated, we were able to run simulations on these computers. From celestial body movement to stock market values, many subjects were run through simulations to attempt to predict potential futures. After a very influential movie came out, the question of whether or not our reality is a simulation began to appear. At first shot down as taking the film too seriously. About 20 years later, the scientific community began to ponder this question, and the mass population began to see it as less crazy and more of a legit question. Of course, no one wants to be a simulation. We want to believe we are real people with real thoughts and emotions and total free will. However, if we do belong to a simulation, do we want it to end? Let's say we're just computer-generated characters. If the simulation has ended, we die with it, maybe backed up on some text log somewhere as the only proof we existed. Now, let's say we're actual humans that are plugged into a computer system. What if the real world is completely different from what we know? Would you really want to subject yourself to a place that you have no idea how to live in? And really, if the simulation is all you know, that is as much a real world as the unsimulated world is. Anyways, these are just the thoughts coursing through my mind. That is before the bullet plunges into it, and I test this theory for real. Our expedition to the Arctic North was cut short. We had only set up our base camp a few days ago. We began cutting through the ice, down to where the samples of microlife would be. When we finally lifted the 3-ton layer of ice we cut off, we were greeted to something far bigger than what we had anticipated. a section of a limb. A large one. The width of an average adult male. The length was unknown. We seem to have revealed only a portion of it. Whatever this was, there was only a foot of ice separating us from it. We covered it back up, forged some records saying no bacteria was found to dissuade any other research teams from finding that thing. That thing in the glacier, under those northern lights. When the New Lands Oil Company came into our town, they were met with mixed reactions. The promise of new jobs and a boost to the local economy was universally accepted by the newer generation. However, the elders protested to no end. They shouted warnings of disturbing the lands, angering the spirits, so on and so forth. The oil company already had signed the rights to start fracking. The local river that fed the town water supply soon became contaminated with the oil. And in attempts to quell this, New Lands Oil set the river on fire. 3 days later, reports that the fracking machines and the refinery had been completely obliterated. Investigations concluded that it was a terrorist protest spurred on by the locals, but with no clear signs of who was responsible. No arrests were able to be made. The oil company soon left the area, not wanting to lose any more profit from attacks. However, one overnight worker reported that while operating on one of the injection machines the night of the attack, something rose from the river, a large figure that tore apart each machine. The worker also stated that a thick black substance was dripping off of it, almost like it was coated in this liquid. This report was barely in the newspaper at all. It was also suggested that the worker was a delinquent with regular substance abuse. I remember my grandpa reading that blurb and remarking, "I sure don't like it when you mess with the river." Have you ever met someone that changes your perspective? Someone who has a mind that thinks differently than yours, but you can't help but be enamored by them. Maybe you have yet to have this chance. I did. She had a different religion than me. She had a different outlook on life. The only thing we shared was our sense of humor. However, it was these differences, these perceived faults, that made us attracted to each other. We were truly individuals to each other, and we wanted more of it. It was a chance encounter, one that changed my life. I've been looking for someone like her again. I've come close, but they keep missing one key aspect. I don't know what this aspect is, but when I find it, I'll know. I've spent too much time trying to pick apart their minds. So, I invested in some sharp tools and started just picking them apart. And I still haven't found it. The old wooden town of Tumbleweed was silent, only the sounds of the winds humming through the alleys and dust sweeping the scene. For 5 long years, the notorious Bronson troubled the Arizona desert. Town after town, homestead after the next. Many knew the shine of his revolver. Few could tell the story. After all these years, his bounty finally hit $2,000. And in 1823, that much money would have set you for life. This bounty caught the eye of a criminal gunslinger turned bounty hunter, One-Shot Marco. At first he couldn't have cared less about Bronson, but he had one principle that should any man or woman break, they would know his fury. Bronson raised the town Marco grew up in. In a bloody mess, the townsfolk were slaughtered and left for the vultures. His wife was among the faces of the dead, beaten in and clothing torn. Since then, Bronson had been in his sights. Marco knew this town was the last one untouched by any raiders until now. This would be his chance to confront Bronson before the slippery lizard could leave the state. The street was clear save the two, their revolvers holstered, ready to fire, their hands hovering in place. Death was watching over them, and soon he would have his toll. In blinding speed, they drew their weapons and fired. The Reaper smirked. A child sits in the living room, playing with his toys scattered about him. The TV plays a show that's made for a kid's mind. His mom is in the kitchen, preparing food, not realizing what lurks close to the child. There's an eastward window in the living room. The sun has already passed it. The thin piece of glass is the only thing separating the boy from the world, slowly being plunged into night. Outside that window is a creature, one ready to steal him away as soon as it gets the chance. Outside that window is a monster waiting to chew him to bits and break him down in its caustic belly. Outside that window awaits an unimaginable terror that will try as hard as it can to break this child and stomp him into the mud. The front door opens. The boy's father steps in after a long day at work. He takes a seat on the living room couch after holding his wife for a moment. As he watches his boy play with the plastic products on the floor, he looks to the window. Outside is the trial and tribulations that awaited him as a boy. Hardships that his father before him gave him the strength to endure. In time, he will teach his son to clench his fist and brave the beasts that await him. Outside the window awaits the world, ready to break all those who let it. Why aren't you smiling? You should be more positive. You should forget about all what's going on in the world. It doesn't concern you. Not like you can do anything about it. Just relax. Slip into one of those vices we advertise on TV. Put on an amused face. Wouldn't want to look ungrateful now, would you? Can't get over the disappointing reality around you? We have pills for that. Feel like there's something missing in your life? We have products for that. There's really no reason for you not to be happy. Just remember, a glum face doesn't make people want you. And remember, you aren't anyone without having a social group. I know. Maybe a shallow movie to feed that fantasy of yours will do the trick. Of course, you'll have to keep watching them to keep that feeling going, but hey, at least you won't be sad. Now, if I were you, I'd put on a smile. Or else. When you make eye contact with someone, what do you see? Do you see another person or a shell? Maybe you've stopped making eye contact because every time you look at someone else, you see nothing behind their eyes. You've become tired of looking at husks of former people. The unfortunate part is, since you aren't making eye contact, those who are like you won't recognize you either. I remember many things happening. I didn't understand them, but we walked for miles after the loudness was over. I remember we found a house. It was half destroyed, but I didn't care. I was with you. I remember we were there for a long time. Then one night, more loudness came. It broke into the house. I tried to make it go away, but I fell asleep somehow. I remember waking up and you disappeared. I looked all over the house for you, but I couldn't find you. The door was open, so I looked outside, and you still weren't there. I remember waiting in the house for a long time, and you didn't come back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to our old house. Maybe you were there but had forgotten me. It took me a long time to get there, but I did. I could barely contain my excitement. The door was open. You had to be there. But you weren't. It was empty too. I remember walking in the place with all the tall houses, trying to find you. There used to be a lot of people here, but now it all looked ruined. That's when I heard your voice. I ran and ran. I couldn't stop. But then I did. It wasn't you. It was someone else. They were dressed strangely, but they seemed to be nice. The one that sounded like you asked me if I had an owner. I wanted to say yes, but I didn't know where you were. I was tired, and I couldn't find you. I don't know where you are, or why you disappeared. But I found others that are taking care of me, and I'm going to take care of them, as I did with you. I remember you, and I always will. When I was a kid, I remember one day I was out in the backyard, bright sunny day. I was doing something on the ground when I saw shadows crossing the yard. I looked up and saw planes, hundreds of thousands of planes. I heard on TV about some bad stuff going on in some other country, but it never really hit me that hard till then. It wasn't until I was 13 when I asked my parents about it. What confused me was when they told me those weren't planes. They were people. I didn't understand them. It wasn't until I was an adult and read the Bible that I finally understood. They were people. I just realized I'm sitting on the sidewalk. I think I was in a trance for the last few hours. I'm remembering it now. I just killed my parents. They're back in the house, gunshots in their head. I don't remember why I did it. I just did. It's strange, though, doing something as extreme as this. Feels like the credits to a movie should roll or something. But they aren't. Seconds just keep rolling by. The sun is rising still. Maybe the end of this film will come once it's over the trees. No, it's still going. That's right. I called the police a few minutes ago. I think I see their lights. Maybe the credits will roll now. No. It doesn't stop.